Hey, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the NTC podcast. This is episode 102, brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. This is Aaron Washington, your host. Glad you guys have taken the opportunity to check out another episode. This afternoon, I am joined by Kristian Winfield. He is a beat writer for the New York Daily News. He's been there for not too long, but he was covering the Nets rather before that. So he definitely has some experience as a beat writer. And figured I'd bring him on here because we're discussing the Eastern Conference and specifically how the race is shaping up towards the top and in the middle seeds. And, we have a lot to cover. There's a lot of great teams out there jostling for a position. So, Kristian, thanks for taking the time to join me, man. I know it's been kind of a crazy week for you. There's been some stuff going on, but, in any case, glad to have you on, man. It should be a conversation here today.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Thanks for being flexible. I'm actually, after this, I'm going to head over to Madison Square Garden because the Knicks host Steph Curry and the Warriors. They didn't have any shoot around today, so I got to go get to the arena a little early and see what it's looking like. So excited to record with you, and then after that, we're going to hustle over to the Garden.
Hey, sounds good, man. Brought back memories of Curry's, what was that 54 piece back in New York, 2013?
Yeah, I wish I was there, but I was still in college when he did that, man. It was crazy. But, every time he comes to the Garden, I'm thinking, maybe this is going to be another night where he tries to go for the record. But I think Melo is chilling for right now.
Yeah, I feel that, man. But in any case, let's go ahead and get into the action here. We have a few teams we're going to discuss. Like I said, Eastern Conference. We covered the Western Conference last week, and that's a whole battle in itself.
Sure.
But we cannot discount the Eastern Conference. It's not like it was 10, 12 years ago. It's hotly contested. There's a ton of teams here that are making noise. And Kristian, I know you cover the Knicks quite a bit, and we're going to get to them here in a minute. But before we get to that situation, wanted to cover the top of the Eastern Conference here. It's going to be the Boston Celtics that we are hitting on number one here. So as the number one seed, their resume is super impressive. They're always near or at the top of the Eastern Conference. This season, they're currently 46-12 with an adjusted net rating of plus 10.1. That's number one in the league. And I think it's at a decent margin. And that's a number I got from Dunks and Threes, their database there. So when it comes to Boston, it's a team we've covered a little bit here on the podcast and what makes them so great. We've dove into the game of Derek White a fair amount before. We were talking about all-stars. We talked about Porzingis. He kind of ties everything together for them on both ends of the floor. But really for them, I think the secret sauce is that deadly five-out offense that they can play. Yeah. All five guys are at the perimeter. They can all space. They can all drive. They move the ball quite well. And I looked up the numbers here for the Holiday, White, Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis five there. It's crazy numbers. They've played 1,033 possessions together. And the efficiency differential, so if we're taking the offense and defense differentials, putting them together, plus 15.4. Now, that's a pretty high number. I know I don't have kind of like a great basis to place that on relative to other teams, but just know it's a really high number. So these dudes are doing crazy work together. Just the three-point efficiency, the rim efficiency. They don't take a ton of attempts at the rim, but they're very efficient once they get there. And just that versatility they have on defense. You're not going to be able to find one player that you can pick on like a lot of other teams have. For instance, the Knicks, maybe someone like Jalen Brunson is a target on defense. That's not the case with Boston. All five guys can defend in their own right. They have length, they have toughness, and they have experience. They've played a lot of minutes together, specifically in the playoffs here. So, Kristian, just want to get some of your thoughts here on the Celtics. Do you kind of have some of the similar thoughts as far as what makes them so formidable? And do you see anything of this team that can possibly even inspire an ounce of doubt as to whether or not they can just charge through the Eastern Conference and get back to the finals this season?
Nah, I think honestly, I think the East is a two-team race, right? I think we're looking at Boston and we're looking at Milwaukee. I think Cleveland kind of leapfrogged Milwaukee because they're, obviously the Bucks were dealing with defensive issues and they pinned that on the coach. And now they have Doc Rivers coming in and now you understand that, well, it's not an overnight success. That's going to take some time. Boston, it just to add on to all the things that you laid out, it's a level of selflessness that you see from that team where one night it's Tatum, the next night it's Derek White, who's the guy who's giving it to you. The next night it's Kristaps Porzingis who hit 5 threes, right? It's just any time, any day, any game, someone different can be responsible for winning. And that just takes a level of buy-in. And not all players on all teams are willing to buy in at a level that the Celtics have because they've proven they've gotten to the NBA Finals and fallen short, right? They've knocked on the door of the NBA Finals for years on end and haven't made it. And now you've got a situation where here they have a time to – I think this is their year. If you ask me, I think they're the team that's going to the NBA Finals. They're going to come out on top. And I think this is a year where maybe we see Tatum's name in that MVP conversation, because he's a guy where, he's the best player on the team that is standalone, the best in the league. Like, you're looking at the Western Conference, and they're several games ahead of the best team in the West right now.
Yep.
So just to add on to your point, yes, it's the defensive versatility, it's the 5-out, it's the spacing, it's Tatum's greatness, Jaylen Brown, two-way, it's all of that. But it's a level of buy-in and selflessness that's gotten them to where they are right now, especially when you consider having a coaching change and everyone over there loved Ime Udoka, and to replace him and to bring in Joe Mazzulla, and for Joe Mazzulla to kind of carry the torch the way he has. I think it's just a level of buy-in and selflessness has gotten them this far for sure.
Absolutely. If you're going to be a title contending team, you have to have sacrifice.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to buy into their roles. It doesn't matter whether they're starting or coming off the bench. I mean, everybody just knows exactly what their role is going to be, and they do it perfectly. And, I want to give a little bit more love to Derek White as a connector here.
Yeah.
In years past, he's typically been kind of like a six-man, kind of shifting between bench and starting status. This season, when I went and looked at the leaderboard on dunks and threes, as far as the estimated plus minus, so if we're taking one number to kind of estimate a player's impact during a game, you're going to see all the typical names. You're going to see Luka and Jokic and Tatum and all these guys. And number 15 on that list is Derek White. And he's right in between guys like Jalen Brunson and all these like superstars. They're number one options on these teams. And you got Derek White sitting there with the estimated plus minus of plus 4.7 right there amongst some of the best names in the business. So as a guy like that on your team that, maybe it's the third or fourth option, like that is just an abundance of riches there on both ends of the floor. And then I think 2 or 3 spots down from him is Porzingis right there at like 17, 18 in the entire league. So not to say that these guys are superstars, but their impact is on a level that is not matched by many other players. So that is kind of what ties them all together. They have the star power, but then they have the depth to kind of supplement them as well. And to go back to your point, Kristian, about the Tatum MVP argument, he has a lot of things in his favor. You look at the box score stats, the 27 points a game, the 8.5 rebounds, really solid numbers. The efficiency is pretty good. 56% from 2, 36 from 3. He takes a lot of tough jumpers. Those are pretty solid numbers. And he's actually a solid two-way player. Estimated defensive plus minus of plus 0.9. That's 80th percentile. I think a couple of things that kind of hurt him a little bit. He's not as dominant as some of those other guys like Embiid and Jokic and Luka. And his efficiency is kind of middle of the road. He's not going to be somebody that's just like absolute deadly every single night from the field. And, sometimes he's a little bit shy about getting to the rim and really kind of forcing the issue in there. So it's nitpicking, I know, but it's kind of what you have to do if we're talking about MVPs of the entire league. But I mean, other than that, he's got a great resume. Like you said, best player and best team. So he has a lot going in his favor.
Yeah, and when you break it down even more, for example, I'll be voting. I have an MVP vote this year. I had an All-Star vote, and I'm looking at the standings right now, and the Mavericks are 7th in the Western Conference. Yeah. I love what Luka's doing. I can't bring myself to vote for the MVP as a guy whose team is 7th in the West.
Yeah,
right. Like I don't think I could do that. I think I would be more inclined to vote Shea as an MVP candidate, given what he's done with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that might sound crazy to some because Luka, arguably the most electrifying player in this game right now, based on what he's able to do with a basketball at any given moment. Mm-hmm. But you just have to account for team success. And Tatum, it's not just this year. It's an extended period of dominance that the Celtics have had in the Eastern Conference. I think that just kind of gets overlooked because you kind of get used to it now. Oh, you're used to Tatum going out there and getting you 30. You're used to, and to your point, Embiid is dominant, right? And I love Embiid and how he plays, right? The last time I voted, I think was the year that Jokic won, and I voted for Embiid because I thought that the dominance was what played a factor in that. But I think we're ruling Embiid out this year, right? Because he's going to miss a certain number of games. He's not going to get in there. I think at a certain point, you have to look at what Tatum's been able to do. You have to look at how the Celtics have been able to play, and you have to rule that in his favor in terms of just winning basketball, being the best player on the best team. And then to your other point, Derek White is the guy that Tom Thibodeau always points out on the scouting report. He goes, Jason Tatum can get you, Jaylen Brown can kill you, but if you forget about Derek White, then you're already lost, right? So, I think every team needs a guy like Derek White. He's a guy who, again, selflessness, doesn't care about when he gets the ball. He knows how to play his role. He's going to fit in, do the little things, do the dirty work. Man, I love Derek White's game. He's a guy that every team could use.
Fantastic guy, fantastic glue guy, role player. And even some nights, you think about what Thibodeau was saying, I mean, yeah, he can absolutely kill you with 4 or 5 threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks. But we had a prior podcast and we highlighted him before. I think it was maybe a few weeks before All-Star. We talked about how, defensively, he's an absolute destroyer at the rim as a 6'4" guard. So
Yeah.
just having that in his favor helps so much. And to tie that all together, I think that's what makes them probably the favorite, if not in the East, then even in the entire NBA as far as making the NBA Finals again. Uh, Trying to think of an opponent that can possibly like really give them problems. For me, I don't know about you and how you feel about New York's chances here, but I think Miami still has the best chance. We've seen it multiple years in the past. They knocked them off, twice, and they played them, and they lost by literally. It came down to a last shot that third time.
Yeah.
I think they just have the coaching, the personnel, the toughness. They also have a level of versatility on defense, having Bam in the mix and Jimmy
Yeah.
to really give them problems. So, I mean, if I had to find a team that can possibly knock them off before the finals, Miami's still probably going to be my pick, even though they still have some flaws. Would you have a counter to that,
That's
or
tough.
how
I
do you
mean,
feel
we're
about
gonna
that?
get to the Bucks. I still like the Bucks. I like the Bucks a lot. I think that Dame pickup. I think that, and we're gonna get there. I think we were all foolish. Anyone who thought that they weren't gonna fall off defensively when you move Drew Holiday and replace him with Damian Lillard, I got a bridge to sell you to. If you thought they were gonna be the #1 defensive team or in that top 5 after making that trade, obviously not. But
No.
once they get that offense clicking and once they get things the way it's supposed to be, Dame is a big game player, right? Giannis is playing for a championship. I like Dame's odds in a series against Drew Holiday and Derek White. For example, I thought Drew Holiday and Derek White were going to give Jalen Brunson problems. He gave him 35. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't always even out to great defenders neutralize great scorers. So I think it'll be interesting. I think to your point, Miami also, yes, you can't. Miami and the Knicks are matched up right now 4-5. If that's who the Knicks end up drawing, God bless you. I don't know if the Knicks are going to be able to get out of that series, but then again, it depends on health because OG has to come out. We'll get into the Knicks stuff, but to your point, I like Milwaukee. I don't know if I like Milwaukee in a series against Boston because Boston is tough. And I think they just have that nucleus and that chemistry over a large span of years, and Milwaukee's still trying to figure things out, looping Dame into the fold. But Miami is a tough matchup for anybody, especially Boston.
Absolutely, man. And we'll get to them here in a minute. We'll touch on Miami very briefly. But to move on to the #2 seed currently here in the Eastern Conference, looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers. So when we're talking about their case for being, one of the leaders in the Eastern Conference, it really comes down here to the defense. And, that's their calling card. So 4th in adjusted net rating here at plus 4.7, 38-19 as of today. That's their total record. And you look at what they have going with the Twin Towers of Mobley and Allen. I mean, they're going to have a chance every single night just because absolutely deadly at the rim. You're not getting anything easy with that lineup. And you also have a couple other factors around the wing. You have Isaac Okoro, who's been much improved this season. And that kind of helps tie things together. And then they just made a singular focus in the offseason, go get more shooting. They thought that was one of the big reasons why they flamed out in the playoffs, was just not having enough spacing to go along with those Twin Towers. So they go out there and get George Niang, and they go out there and get Max Strus. And they've both been very solid for them. But I look at that starting lineup, and you put Strus in there. I did the same thing as I did with the Boston lineup. I went and I looked at the efficiency differential. It's way lower. So they have 549 possessions together, a lot less than Boston. But the efficiency differential, we're talking about percentile, it's only average. And that's not what you want to see from your primary starting lineup. And the big reason for that, it comes down to the offense. So if we go on the other side of the coin and look at that, it's kind of average. And it kind of really suffers sometimes. And it's a big reason last night why they just completely blew that game against Chicago. That offense went stale for multiple moments in that game, especially late. So for me, it's still kind of a sticking point as far as like how I feel about their chances of making a deep run. I love Donovan Mitchell, 28 points a game. He's been phenomenal. He's going to give them a great chance at being a great team in the regular season and at least having a chance in a lot of playoff games. But I think if they don't find a way to kind of level off that offense to go along with their supreme defense, they're still going to have problems in the postseason. But how do you feel about the Cavaliers so far? Just looking at all the metrics here.
I hate to call it a fluke, But according to Positive Residual, they had the third easiest schedule leading into the All-Star break, and that's why they were able to run up their standing, their schedule. I mean, their record like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see what it looks like in the second half of the season. And to your point, yeah, I kind of pulled up some of the stats here for Strus and Niang. Strus is shooting 34% from three. He shoots a little bit under 32% in the playoffs. Niang is shooting a little under 36% from three, which I found interesting because he shot 40% or better each of the past 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think Niang is going to play a big role in the playoffs because I think last year he shot 46% in the playoffs. So I think we all understood going into coming out of free agency that the Cavs addressed their need, which was kind of trying to get some help on that wing. I'm still I like the idea in theory of having Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, but after covering the Nets for a while, just having 2 non-shooters on the floor is going to be difficult. And I know Evan Mobley is shooting 10 of 28 from 3, so that makes him it looks nice in a percentage, which is 36. But if you don't have someone that's a legitimate floor spacer on there to support your rim rolling and rim protecting center, I think it's going to be tough for any team. So I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of the long-term picture. I'm not even sure what it looks like in terms of the playoffs because we saw last year the Knicks packed up the Cavs, even though they were the 5 seed, and the Knicks and the Cavs were the 4 seed. So it'll be interesting. I like what Donovan Mitchell's been able to do there. I'm just not sold on them, and I don't think I will be. I think they're still missing something. There's something there that's missing. Yes, the defense, it looks good. The analytics on it look good. Offensively, I kind of like the Garland and Mitchell pairing, but I think that there's something in that front court that's not quite there yet. And because of that, this is a wings league. I've seen KD say it. We've seen a lot of different players say it. Until you have that legitimate option on the wing, which I don't think. You talk about Okoro, you talk about Strus, you talk about Niang. I don't think any of those guys are the answer at the 3. I think they're just stopgaps until you figure something out. And then they got to figure out what they're going to do at that 4-5, because if you don't have spacing, if you don't have 4 players that can shoot, 5 threes a game, every game on the floor, I don't know that in this NBA you're going to be able to last long, especially in the playoffs, because in playoffs teams are going to key in on that. They're going to put 5 shooters on the floor, and then you're going to pull Mobley and Allen away from the rim, and then you're going to attack the paint all day. Timeout. We got to do something about it. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm bullish on them like that.
I'm really not either. And we just talked about a team that can do exactly that. Pull the big men out of the paint. The Boston Celtics, they do that at a great level. So I think all the reasons you mentioned, it kind of goes along with what I was saying, just about the offense. Just sometimes it's pretty solid, and sometimes it's just not quite there. Something is missing, like you said. And really for Mobley, it comes down more than just the percentage. It's just the willingness to shoot. He's not a guy that's going to take a ton of attempts. And to gain the respect on the perimeter, I think even more than a percentage, you have to have the attempts to go along with it.
Exactly.
If coaches are looking at what you're doing in the locker room before the game, and they see 2.5 attempts per game, it's like, okay, he's probably going to pass or drive anyway. So why are we going to get this out? He's not even worth the trouble. So looking at that from that perspective, he's just not going to garner a lot of attention there in the playoffs. And I think that's one reason why their offensive rating has been kind of drugged down this season. It's just because he hasn't made enough of a leap offensively to supplement a guy like Allen. Now, if he's playing in a lineup to where he is the big, and you go along with 4 wings or rather you 2 wings and 2 guards along with Allen or Mobley as the center, the numbers are a lot better.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why they had that long winning streak. I think it was 19 of 21 games they won at one point. And that was when they were mostly not healthy. And Mobley missed a lot of time. Garland missed time. But then they got back to a lineup to where it's more traditional in today's NBA, to where you have a lot of shooters. And then hey, we have that one big man in the middle that can just roll to the rim without anybody clogging the lane. And now it's okay, how do they kind of take some of that magic that they had in the middle of the season and kind of blend it with their whole lineup? Because you have to play both of those bigs. You can't just have one of them come off the bench.
Exactly.
So I'm thinking maybe they stagger their minutes a little bit. You give Okoro more minutes because he's right now he's shooting, I think, close to 40% from 3, which is a huge improvement from what we saw before.
Shout out to him.
Absolutely, man. And he can still take on a lot of those wing assignments. So if you're playing a Tatum in the playoffs, or you're playing OG and a Nubian in a playoff series, hey, we have Okoro, we can stick on him. but at the same time, he's not going to drag down our 3-point percentage. He's going to take attempts in the corner and shoot 38, 39%, hopefully in the playoffs. We'll see how that translates.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of their key to kind of making this all work, is just kind of tinkering with those lineups. But even then, it's going to be a challenge because your best players need to be on the court. And I'm just not sure if they're going to all mesh enough to really get them over the hump.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, I think it's matchup based, especially in the playoffs. For example, if the playoffs started today, the Cavs are drawing the Pacers, and we're talking about 5 out. The Pacers are going to put Miles Turner right out there. You're going to have Siakam. You're going to have Halliburton. You're going to have other shooters. That, I mean, it looks like on paper the Cavs should win that series, but that could go either way. The Pacers are an electrifying team. They're going to run up and down and shoot a bunch of threes. So that's a series right there that'll force them to play with their rotations a bit. But it's interesting. I think these teams, number one, we've got a lot of basketball left to play before we're even at a space where we know what the standards are. The Knicks, and we're going to get there with no Julius Randle, no OG Anunoby for a little while. They're at 4th right now. We could see them drop down to as low as 7th or 8th because there's only 2 games that separate the 4th seed from the 8th seed right now. So it's tough right now. I think the Cavs have a little bit of a cushion where they have their 8 games back now. They could fall down to 3. Because Milwaukee's right behind them. I think they have a little bit of a cushion. I think the Cavs right now they're going to be a good regular season team. I think their flaws are the type that get exposed in the playoffs, and that's just going to be difficult because Donovan Mitchell is electrifying, but we haven't seen him really put a team on his back in the playoffs the way we would need them to do. For example, in Utah, last year against the Knicks, that was a series that the Cavs were supposed to win, and they didn't. So I think the Cavs are a team where all their questions have to be answered in the playoffs, not in the regular season. They could easily finish the regular season number 2 and then lose to the Pacers in the first round because the matchup isn't right. And I don't think I would be surprised.
I wouldn't either, honestly. So for them, it just comes down to that whole balance. And I agree. Regular season, they're built to win, but playoffs is a different story. And that weak point that teams can't really capitalize on in 82 games, they're really going to buckle down. And if they go up against the Knicks again, Thibodeau is going to be ready. Mm-hmm. That's what those guys do. They really lock down on defense and really give those guys a run for their money. So, that's kind of the story on Cleveland. We'll see how they kind of level all that out. But it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of finish the season because they do have some great pieces there, but not sure if they have that kind of missing piece just yet.
Yeah.
Now, for a team that is they've been up and down this season. I think for Milwaukee, it's really been a roller coaster. They've had some great stretches to where, hey, this team could really make a deep run. Dame and Giannis starting to click, and they're figuring this whole thing out. And then there have been other times like that Memphis game right before the All-Star break where it just kind of falls apart. And it still looks like they just started playing together. It's like, okay, are we starting to – is there any progress here? Or are you guys figuring it out? So, right now they're at 38-21, third in the Eastern Conference. And, their net rating is solid at 9th overall in the league. They do have the 3rd worst remaining schedule in terms of strength of schedule here. So that's going to work against them, and it might hinder their progress as far as staying as a top 3 or 4 seed. We'll have to see how that goes. But right now, just looking at that coaching change, because I think that's the elephant in the room for them, is moving off from Griffin, moving on to Doc Rivers. You get the experience for sure. This is a guy that has a championship on his resume. He's been in several deep playoff runs. The results haven't been great. We'll say the end results, to put it somewhat nicely. But they brought him in to kind of enable they wanted to see some kind of a shift there. The results with Griffin were kind of, like I said, up and down. But I think the results thus far with Rivers have been, again, like a mixed bag. It's like they've won some games here. They've done a little bit better. But at the same time, like I haven't seen any kind of huge jump from them. They seem mostly the same team. Now, there are 2 main concerns here I have with the Bucks as far as the rest of the season, how this could shake out for them. Number one is Dame. I think he's taking a little bit of a step back this season. I've watched a fair amount of Milwaukee games and looked at Lillard's numbers. The efficiency is down. He's not shooting the same as he was before. Those patented Dame long threes, even when they're open, just aren't going in the rate they were before. And, the rim is fine. He's finishing about the same at the rim. It's just that the 3-point percentage is down about 2.5 percentage points. And then the 2-point percentage is down by a few points. So he's just not converting at the rate he usually does. And the second issue I have with this team is Chris Middleton and how he's going to hold up.
Yeah.
Now, last season, he only played 33 games. This season, he's already missed 17, and he's still out as of today. So when your primary wing option, we just got done talking about how important wings are in this day and age in the NBA. If your primary wing option is not playing, it's going to put more pressure on Connaughton to make an impact, and you've got to rely more on the bench. And their bench is only 20th in the league in scoring, so that's not a huge plus point for them.
Yeah.
So I have a few points of concern. And yeah, there still needs to be some refining in terms of how that offense goes. So those are a few of the thoughts I have on Milwaukee and how they're doing. I wish I could share your confidence in how they could fare against like a Boston, or how they can do, like, they still have the pieces to get it done with the star power, but
Yeah.
I see some holes there that I think could really get exposed in the playoffs. But that's just kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking off of that, if Middleton is not available in any playoff series, I don't like the Bucks' chances.
Yeah,
Just because I think, especially when you're trying to incorporate where Dame fits in and new coaching and all that, you need that third option, right? If your third option is Brooke Lopez or Bobby Portis, I don't care if Giannis is going out there and getting you 50, 10, and 10. It's just going to be tough.
yeah,
But the Bucks are a team where I think that I'm not necessarily too concerned about the standings with them. I'm more so concerned about the process, right? Because
yeah,
from everything I heard about Adrian Griffin and how he lost his locker room, it's just from an X's and O's standpoint, they didn't really like what he was running out there. And then on top of that, I'm just not a fan, honestly, of rookie head coaches coming into championship situations, right?
yeah.
Like,
That's
it's
tough.
the reason why I didn't like the Steve Nash hire for the Nets, which didn't work for them.
Mhm.
Adrian Griffin obviously didn't work out. It's just it doesn't make sense. So yes, Doc Rivers obviously has blown more 3-1 leads than what anybody else. But at the same time, he's been around, he's got experience, and he was already a consultant in there. I think it made sense. I kind of like it. I think we'll see what happens. I think it's more so, number one, with Dame. I was hoping that after he came out and did what he did during the All-Star game, that would just give him the launch pad to start dominating. I
Right,
think
that's
he
what I
gave
was thinking.
I think
Yeah,
I think he had one, but that didn't really do much for him. And I understand. I kind of empathize a little bit going from being the number one guy, this is your franchise, to joining somebody else's team. Doesn't matter how many times Giannis tells us this is Dame's team. This is Giannis's team, right? We
yeah,
all understand that.
for sure.
So there's obviously a learning curve there for Dame going from being the number one guy to the number two. But at the end of the day, if we're talking playoffs, I don't think there's a more dominant player in the East outside of Embiid than Giannis, right? I would go Embiid number one in terms of dominance, Giannis number two. And if I've got to put my money on anybody in a series while Giannis is on the floor, I kind of like him. But if Middleton is not there, it just throws off your offensive balance a whole lot.
Yeah,
So it's difficult. It's kind of like trying to judge the Knicks right now when OG and Julius and Mitchell Robinson are all out, right? It's like, wait, well, you're missing a key piece. Well, I think with the Bucks, you want to see them on a string defensively. You want to see them locked in on that side, and then you want to see that offense. I feel like there was a point in the season where we were seeing a lot of really high screen set, almost near half court for Dame, where he would just get downhill and be aggressive, and we haven't seen as many of those. I kind of just want to get back to seeing that offense running through Dame in a way where that just makes him look like the same guy that he was in Portland. I know it's different than it was in Portland, but there's just some things that we'll see where if they're able to get back to it to make Dame feel like maybe not necessarily comfortable, but in a way where he's just kind of empowered to go out there and try to get 50. I
yeah.
think that would help them as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's coming from a situation in Portland, like you said. I mean, he's dominating the ball, and his usage rate is about 30%. He's making everything happen for them. Now he has to scale back his touches. So now he's only at about maybe 26% usage, still pretty high. I think Clean the Glasses database has that like 78 to 80th percentile. But I
Yeah.
mean, he was in the 90s. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a pretty steep drop for him. And that's probably one of the reasons why he's been a little uncomfortable. Just sometimes it seems like he's not quite sure when to take over, when not to. It's pretty cut and dry in the clutch when you watch him in the last 5 minutes of a game. It's like, hey, go make something happen. That's why we brought you here. Close games, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But for the other, 43, 44 minutes, it's like, okay, when do I get mine? When am I playing off of Giannis? It's just kind of a tricky situation. I still think they're trying to figure out,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to figure it out if you want to win a championship. Like, that much is clear. That balance has to be there. And going back to Middleton, he's such an integral part of this team because he's one of those tough shot makers in that kind of
Yeah.
in between space. So when you look at Dame, it's like, okay, I can get downhill, I can hit threes. Giannis, obviously, he's going to get downhill with the best of them. But in the playoffs, sometimes you're going to need some shots from 10, 12, 15 feet, 18 feet with a hand in your face. And Middleton, at his best, I mean, he's like he's trying to be Kobe out there when he's really hitting shots at a higher level in
Yeah.
the mid range. So yeah, not having him, I think it really could just destroy their chances. And that's happened to them in a couple years in the past where Middleton hasn't been healthy, and it's cost him.
Yeah,
So
and then we've seen him be healthy, and he be the reason why he can swing a series. Because if Middleton's out there, you can't just go say, okay, we're going to sell out defensively on Dame and sell out defensively on Giannis and make him pay. Nah, because Chris Middleton is going to make it pay. He's not out there. Well, okay, now we're looking at Bobby Portis. We're looking at whoever else is on the rotation. We're looking at Brook Lopez. We're looking at other guys to try to step in. I don't really like that. So I think again, we kind of said this earlier. This is a Bucks team that we're really going to judge in April, May. Right. And I think it's matchup based for them too, right? If they draw Miami, then who knows where that series goes. But for the most part, I think if you're getting a healthy Giannis and you're getting a healthy Dame, and Doc is doing a good job in terms of getting these guys on the right page defensively, I'm part of me wants to say the offense is going to figure itself out. I feel like, especially when it's crunch time and it's time to win games in the playoffs, it's going to be Dame and Giannis and everybody else go get out on the 3-point line. We're going to get to the paint, make the defense collapse, spray the ball out, get the ball to an open shot, right? So hopefully that works for them, but it just looks a little clunky right now. And if it doesn't start to look a little clean, we're talking in the middle of April going into the playoffs, then I might be a little concerned.
Me too. And let me play devil's advocate here a little bit as far as that offensive scheme you were talking about with the Bucks. It's the whole, pass, skip, take a lot of threes, hopefully hit a lot of threes. And I'm just thinking, because I watched a video by Thinking Basketball yesterday on their YouTube channel. They have some great content, and they were talking about Milwaukee, one of their weaknesses, and that's rim pressure. So they had some numbers off their clean Thinking Basketball database, and they were talking about the lack of rim attempts that the guys other than Dame and Giannis have on their team. Middleton is in the 13th percentile in terms of field goals at the rim, the percentile. Connaughton is 7th percentile. Beasley is at the 4th percentile, and Jay Crowder is in the 1st percentile. So basically, he never takes shots at the rim, which matches up with the eye test. If you watch these guys, those guys just very rarely take shots at the rim. It's going to be mid-range, or it's going to be spot-up threes, especially for guys like Crowder. It's like, hey, hit me right here, give me a little bit of space, I'm just going to pull up, and that's what I do. So if they play a team like, let's say, Boston or Cleveland, to where they have a really solid defense and they can switch everything, and they're not going to let the Bucks get their patented 3-point game going, and maybe they can form a wall a little bit on Giannis and not take that away from him, force some of those other guys to make something happen. How does that look for them? Could it really break down their offense there a little bit? And I think that's another reason why it's been kind of a erratic ride for them in terms of offense. If those primary options aren't there, where does it go from there? And I think that's another reason they need Middleton, because he was the highest of that bunch at 13th percentile. Everybody else is under 10. So if he's not there, you really have a gaping hole, especially on the wing, in terms of guys that can make something happen at the rim when the threes aren't falling.
Yeah, I mean, even with Middleton, not even getting to the rim, but his ability just to break down a defender and get to that mid-range pull-up or create something out of the post that you brought up, it's tough. But you look at a lot of teams like that. For example, the Knicks, and we're going to get to them. Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, the guys that put pressure on the rim, right? But other than that, you got a bunch of spot-up shooters. OG is a guy who came in and he started to put more pressure on the rim. Dante DiVincenzo took 18 threes the other day. That's kind of where the league is going right now. Guys are jacking up threes. The All-Star game was a shoot around, right? That's pretty much what it was. So it's kind of just like where the league is trending. But rim pressure, to your point, is necessary. If you can't get to the rim, if you can't force the defense to collapse, number one, that's not going to create open looks for anybody else on the perimeter. But number two, you got to keep the rim protectors honest. You got to try them. So it'll be difficult, but we're hoping Middleton is healthy. And then if Middleton is healthy, you're looking at Giannis, Middleton, and Dame. I don't know if they're going up against the Celtics. That's tough. I still like, it's just something about brute force that I feel like can swing a series. And I feel like we've seen that before, especially with the Heat, for example. It wasn't necessarily brute force, but it was toughness, right? It's just like, there's just a level of, I'm going to wear you down until you can't take it anymore. I think the Bucks have the potential to do that to the Celtics, but not if they're not on a string on both ends of the floor. And they're far from that right now.
For sure. So yeah, it basically just comes down to them kind of figuring things out in the last 20, 22 games or so.
Yeah.
They have the ability, but I mean, some things have to go right. I think they have to get a little bit lucky with the matchups as well, for them
Yeah.
to really make a deep run. So Chris, I think let's go ahead and get to the Knicks here, man. This is your bread and butter.
Hmm.
Like you said before, we're going to cover the game tonight against the Warriors, and they found themselves in a dogfight here because they were on an extraordinary run there for 10, 15 games
Yeah.
before the injuries just really slashed down their roster. Starts with Brunson, obviously. He's been incredible. One of the best scorers in the NBA right now, just with the things he can do on a basketball court at his size, really just extraordinary stuff. So you have to give him so much credit for kind of elevating this Knicks team from mediocrity to really a place of they demand serious respect
Yeah.
from every team in the NBA. Now, the question for them is, how is the rest of the season going to shake out? We talked about this before we went live. They're kind of in a slide right now, not having OG, not having Brunson, not having Robinson. They lost him early, and I think they still miss him quite a bit, especially defensively.
Yeah.
And right now it's just they're kind of trying to make things work. Over the last 2 weeks, they have a
Yeah.
16 offense, so that's staying relatively consistent because you have Jalen Brunson. So it's like, okay, we can manufacture some points even if they're tough. Plus, they made that trade to get Bogdanovich and Burks in there, so that helps supplement the offense a little bit,
Yeah.
replace what they lost. The big hit for them is defensively, and 28th in defense over the last 2 weeks. That's a huge departure from what we saw. I mean, they were a top 5, top 3 defense before those guys got hurt. I mean, they were just
Yeah.
absolutely suffocating their opponents. So now it's a question of, do they have enough to hang on? Do they have enough to maintain whole court advantage? I know they would love to have that. If they don't, it's not a deal breaker, but it's really going to, of course, it always helps to have home court advantage. Right now, they're only a game and a half ahead of the Heat at 35-14. Like we said before, they're not far ahead of the Pacers or Magic either. So it's a possibility they fall all the way down to 8th, and then they're in the play-in tournament. So that's just a whole nother situation they got to deal with. So to kind of present this question to you, Kristian, do you feel like the Knicks have enough here to kind of sustain themselves and what they're doing here into going into the playoffs if they don't have those key contributors that they've been relying on quite a bit before this stretch?
Oh no. If they don't have Julius, if they don't have OG, I think they can survive if Mitchell Robinson doesn't come back until maybe the first round of the playoffs, right? I think Isaiah Hartenstein has been able to hold down the fort. But you're talking about Julius Randle, who's pretty much averaging 24, 9, and 5. And you're talking about OG, who after the trade, the Knicks went 16-3. Right. And they went 12-2 before him and Julius Randle got hurt. They had the number 1 net rating, number 1 defense during that stretch. It was night and day what this team was doing before the trade to after. And then they go and get Bojan Bogdanovich and Alec Burks, and that just gives you legitimate depth. But to your question, can they survive? Can they maintain home court advantage without Julius and OG coming back for the rest of the year? Absolutely not. They won't even be – they might drop down to 6 in the next 10 games. Because if you're looking at number 1, they're 12-22, I think, against teams with winning records this season. They've, really padded their record this year by beating, which you're supposed to. You're supposed to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. That's what they've done. But they've struggled against these teams. And now you're telling me that OG is out and Julius is out. I think they're going to struggle these next 10 games for sure. I got the schedule up right here. You got the Warriors today. I don't know when this episode is coming out. You got the Warriors. This is Thursday, February 29th. You got the Warriors. Sunday, March 3rd, you got the Cavs. Tuesday, March 5th, you got the Hawks, and the Hawks are a below 500 team, but they're trying to creep up, right? So that's not going to be an easy game, especially shorthanded. You got the Magic, who the Knicks haven't beat this year. You got Philly 2 times back-to-back on the 10th and on the 12th, and I know that Embiid isn't playing, but that's still going to be a tough game. Then you got Portland, which should be a win, but then you got Sacramento, Golden State, and Denver, and those are all games on the road. So we're looking at the Knicks potentially with no OG and no Julius. I don't like your odds against Denver. I don't like your odds against Sacramento. I don't like your odds against, honestly, I don't like them against Cleveland. I don't like them against Orlando. It's a tough stretch right here. Yeah, sure. Jalen Brunson's playing out of his mind. It's a great year for him. I thought he should have been an all-star starter. I voted him for as an all-star starter. He lost on the fan vote. That's a conversation for another day. Dante DiVincenzo is probably in the mix for most improved player right now based on how he's played. But then after that, you're kind of just looking, okay, well, you got Isaiah Hartenstein and his availability determined is decided on whether or not his Achilles is feeling okay. Behind him, that they're playing double bigs right now, and I was up here talking about the Cavs playing dual bigs. The Knicks are playing Isaiah Hartenstein and Precious Achiuwa, who's trying to attempt threes, but Tibbs, it looks like he has a brain aneurysm every time he turns down a three and puts the ball on the floor. So you don't really know what to expect. And then at the three, you got Josh Hart, who's playing well, and his 3-point shot is coming along. And so it's kind of one of those situations where the Knicks are going to come out there and they're going to play hard, right? And they're going to go out there, they're going to crash that glass, they're going to defend, they're going to shoot a lot of threes, but you just don't have your defensive stopper, and you don't have the second, and Julius is, coming into the season, I was thinking he was the best player on the team just because, like we spoke about dominance, right? He's a guy that's just going to bully you the whole game and force you to do something about it. You miss that. You need that. So, and then on top of that, until those guys come back, you're forcing everybody to kind of play out of position and above their means. So, and this is going to be a tough stretch for them. But once you start to get some of those guys back, we're looking at OG possibly coming back in the middle of March, looking at Julius maybe coming back a little bit after that. But how is Julius looking when he comes back? It's a shoulder dislocation. He's a guy who he kind of reinvented his game year over year to where now he's just trying to bully guys on the low block. But that requires you throwing that same dislocated shoulder into people over and over. How much of that can you take? So it'll be tough. I'm not sure where the Knicks finish this season. I think if OG comes back, it helps them a lot. But we're looking at the next 10 or so games without him. They could skid here from right now you're fourth, and there's only 2.5 or 3 games separating you from eighth. You could realistically skid to 7th or 8th here, and it really not be your fault because 2 of your 3 key guys are out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we know they're going to fight. I mean, Thibodeau's going to make sure of that. And these guys, sometimes they're just going to get wins because Brunson's that good, and there's enough supplementing him with DiVincenzo and some other guys like that, Hartenstein coming back. But like you said, I mean, it's just going to be an extremely uphill battle for them the rest of the way just because of the injuries. And I hate that for them because they're playing so well.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shows you that all the moves they've made over the past 2 or so years have been absolutely awesome. Starting from the Brunson signing and then going out there and getting OG, which, I mean, even at the time, I thought was a fantastic trade. It's exactly what they needed. And then bringing in a little bit of supplement with Burks and Bogdanovich there to help bring up the bench a little bit. They pretty much addressed every single weakness or concern that we had with them over the past couple of seasons. Like, is there enough shooting? Is there enough defensive versatility? Do they have that wing presence? Like, all that has been addressed now. But now it's like, I mean, that doesn't mean anything if you're not healthy.
Exactly.
So that's the big question for them now. And I mean, just that schedule you pointed out is very tough. And I would be very shocked if they have a winning record over that stretch just because of like how tough that is. But I think for the Knicks here, it's just the goal should be, I think they at least want to stay out of the play-in tournament. I think at the very least, if they can stay above that line to stay in 6th, 5th, or 6th, that put them in a decent situation to where they're not having to go an extra round and fight through. Because I mean, even in the play-in tournament, if you're having to play Orlando in the play-in tournament or Indiana or somebody like that, like you don't want to be in that situation. That's just anything can happen if it comes down to 1 or 2 games. Like,
it's tough, man. And, we're talking about stay out of the play-in. If they lose 2 games and the Pacers win 2 games and the Heat win 2 games, and it's obviously there's a lot of variables here, but if any of these other teams win 2 games and the Knicks lose 2 games, they're right back in it. You got the Heat who have 13 games back behind Boston. You got the Sixers who are 13 games back. You got the Pacers who are 13 games back, and you got the Magic who are 13.5 games back. The Knicks are only 11.5 games back, right? So that means that between 4 and 8, it's 2 games. And that's tough, right? And now what's helping them is Embiid being out, but Embiid could come back before OG, right? Or before any of these guys, before Julius, and now boom, now we're all fearing Philadelphia again. So it's tough. But at the end of the day, I think number one, Knicks fans saw that stretch from January 1st until the 27th when OG and Julius left. That's something you can hang your hat on as, okay, even if this season doesn't result in anything past a first round appearance, from that stretch, okay, we can build on this core. We can build on that. It's just a matter of injuries, man. Sometimes this is out of your control, and Tibbs is going to say next man up. Jalen Brunson's going to say, we had enough to get it done. We fell short. You don't have enough to get it done. The NBA is really talented. And as much as you want to say, Josh Hart, get in there and do it, Precious Achiuwa, get in there and do it, you're not going to replace Julius Randle and OG Anunoby. And neither is game planning, neither is shooting 20 more threes because you don't have Julius to create. Like, you're going to try all these things. You can try to out hustle. It's just I don't see it, right? So you need you need your guys to come back healthy. And then from there you can start judging the team. But until then, they're kind of trapped in this middle ground where, and then on top of that, just to stay afloat, you're gonna have to play guys 45 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. You're going to have to play Jalen Brunson 40 minutes a night, no matter what. You're going to have to play Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Isaiah Hartenstein. All these guys are going to have to lock 40 minutes just for you to beat the Indiana Pacers. Right. And we're not even talking about teams like Boston, teams like Milwaukee, any of them. So it's a tough draw for them. But, you can't. The schedule is a schedule, and injuries happen to everybody. So got to do what you got to do.
It is what it is. That's a good point about the minutes. These guys could get burned out. And if they have to play in the play-in or have a tough first-round matchup, and these guys have played 40 minutes a game for a month straight, that's a whole other set of problems. So that's extremely tough for them.
I think if OG is able to come back, from what I've been hearing, it's looking like in the middle of March. If he's able to come back with a month to spare, I think he might be able to save the day, because now Precious has been playing really well, right? And Isaiah, even though he's kind of prone to his sore left Achilles kind of flaring up here and there, he's been holding down the fort while Mitch is out. The issue has really been we don't have our dominant defensive presence that we had. And then on top of that, OG was shooting the three, and then he was just getting into a groove of putting the ball on the floor and finishing at the rim before he got hurt. Great. So so it's once he's able to come back, and if he's able to now, he's a guy who just got elbow surgery. If you're telling me he's able to come back from elbow surgery middle of March and be able to shoot the ball at the same clip he was, I'd be surprised. But if he is, that's half the battle right there. You get your wing back, you're able to really compete at a high level. Julius Randle just means so much to this team, because he's a guy that he's calling it. As soon as he posts up somebody, other teams are like, all right, we got about a half a second before we got to send the double. And that just creates so much opportunity. They need him to come back for them to be considered what they were. At best, they were number 3, trying to be number 2. I think they were number 2 for a couple of hours before Cleveland came up and took it. So it'll be tough, but it all boils down to health.
That's right. That's the name of the game. You need a little bit of luck in this league to really have a chance here. So, Kristian, I will go ahead and start to let you go here. I know you have a game to cover. Warriors coming to town. That should be a fantastic game.
Oh, yeah.
But before you do, just want to say thanks again for joining this podcast. I love your insight into the Knicks and these other teams in the East. It's been great having you on. And just best of luck the regular season. Hope everything goes well for you. And get that apartment fixed up, man. And that's might be a little wet right now, but
I don't need. It was rainy outside. I don't need it rainy inside. But we'll see what we can do, man. I appreciate you having me on the pod, man. Thank you.
Anytime. If you guys are looking for more content just like this, be sure to check out our website, notradeclause.com, notrade_clause on Twitter, noTradeClause, one word, on Instagram. We have even more content for you coming up here down the stretch of the season. So thanks so much, everybody, again, for tuning in, and we hope to see you in the next installment of NTC. Take care.